Thanks, and welcome to the Wednesday, December 6, 2023 meeting of the Redmond Planning Commission. Call this meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Woodyear.
Present.
Commissioner Aparna.
Present.
Commissioner Van Nyman.
Present.
Commissioner Sheffrin.
Present.
Commissioner Nueva Camina.
Present.
Vice Chair Weston.
Present.
And I'm Chair Sherry Nichols. Also joining us tonight, extending their workday, are staff members Chris Wyatt, Glenn Coyle, Ian Lefcourt, Lauren Albert, Jeff Churchill, Becky Fry, and Jenny Liebeck. Look for a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And the agenda is approved. This is the point of the meeting in which we listen to items from the audience, providing the opportunity for public comment on any item that is not the subject of a public hearing. Looks like everybody who signed up is signed up for the public hearings tonight. Is that correct? Okay, so we will move on.
There's one call.
One
for
call.
Items from the audience, yep.
Okay.
Tanya. So proceed on that.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, is this Anya?
Yeah, hi.
Welcome to the Planning Commission, Redmond Planning Commission. This is items from the audience. You have approximately 3 to 5 minutes, and go ahead and let us know what you wanted to talk about.
Oh, okay, cool. 3 to 5 minutes. Wow. Okay. So, hi, my name is Anya Biryukova. I live at 15654 Northeast 93rd Way. I would like to speak about 3 items today. The first is my concern about RZC 2172090. These are the exceptions for Redmond's tree protection codes, specifically Section B2, which states tree replacement ratios may be modified for master plans within urban centers and local centers. I'm concerned this and possibly some other exemptions in this section are resulting in many significant and landmark trees to be destroyed. I do not like that the urban centers, like Redmond's downtown core, are allowed to get such exemptions. Just because I live in an urban core does not mean I want less tree protection. I understand Redmond is a growing city, but I think these exemptions are unfair. We need to be more creative in our future projects and respect our landmark and significant trees. I also think Redmond's tree replacement rules need to be scrutinized to make sure developers ensure replacement trees are going to be able to become significant or landmark trees in the future, instead of allowing developers to get away with planting small trees and planting trees in small planters that only have around 30 inches of soil depth. A tree needs ample land to grow and develop properly. The planters that new developers are planting trees in to meet the quotas are not created for the optimal health of the tree in mind, and these trees are always going to depend on irrigation systems to be kept alive. I worry that developers are viewing Redmond's tree replacement policies and tree requirements as an insignificant afterthought when creating their large apartment projects. This segues into my second point, which is more of an example of how Redmond's current tree policy is not adequate enough. Chelsea Square is a 100-unit apartment complex that is being slated to be torn down, along with the hundreds of trees on the property, to make room for 2 large 8-story apartment towers. Almost all the trees that are currently on Chelsea Square are slated to be removed, and that includes the massive landmark trees on 164th Street. The developer is being allowed to destroy these landmark trees, and their only requirement is to plant 3 new trees for each landmark tree cut down. There is no requirement for the developer to ensure that the new trees planted are ever going to reach the awe-inspiring beauty of the current landmark trees that have been growing there for decades. My third and final point is about how there is very little plans on developing purchasable housing in downtown Redmond. I do not feel this is due to a lack of interest. Redmond is a beautiful city, close to nature, with great people and community. I would like Redmond to put more serious thought into policies with teeth that encourage developers to build more condominiums and townhouses. I want residents of Redmond to have the ability to purchase a place they can safely call their own so they can comfortably feel like they fully belong here and are not at the mercy of increasing rent prices every year at the hands of billion-dollar real estate investment companies. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that's all the items from the audience, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So then we will move on to Redmond 2050 housing regulations, public hearing and study session. Ian, do you want to set us up?
I sure do. Hello, my name is Ian Lefcourt. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a senior planner with Long Range Planning. This is going to be a continued conversation about our housing element associated regulatory updates. We have a short presentation about kind of the new approach we're hoping to do and how we're integrating the feedback from the commission. At that point, we'll go through the issues matrix kind of line by line. I'll be joined by Mike Stanger from Arch, our affordable housing expert again, to provide some additional content. I will note that we have quite a few items on the issues matrix, so anywhere that you can give us the most direct feedback, we'll try and get that answered tonight, but if we can't, we are coming back on the 20th, so we'll make sure we get it captured there. And with that, perfect. Yeah, so we'll go over the topics that were published for public hearing tonight, and we'll revisit the topics that were from the previous public hearing. And they are related, so they kind of go together nicely, mainly focused around affordable housing bonuses on faith-based land. And we'll go through the next approach, the revised schedule, get everything going that we can. So the items before you tonight include amendments to 2104, 2178, and they essentially add affordable housing on land owned as a use, and they create a definition for faith-based property. It's just kind of the last little pieces that help click all of this together. As a refresher for what we discussed at the previous public hearing, we've got the kind of small lot short plats, which may be a candidate for tabling, because we'll touch that later when we do neighborhood residential zoning. Our ADUs, everything about affordable housing in 2120, the creation of the new 2135 for live-work units, the expansion of 2157 for emergency shelters and emergency housing, and 2174, which is the recipient of the changes that occurred up in 2108. These were the November 15th proposals for IZ and MFTE. And here is the new approach that staff is bringing forward to the commission. Previously, in the draft amendments, there were no substantive changes to fee in lieu. Due to commissioner interest, we have now provided amendments to that section. They were included with the packet tonight. We added criteria for approving the request and kind of added specificity for all the parameters and application of it. For inclusionary zoning, now this is a big one. In the initial amendments we brought forward at the 15th public hearing, it was proposed to amend inclusionary zoning for all geographic areas of the city. Right now, we are revising that to say, okay, let's just look at Overlake right now. We can work with the Overlake analysis supported by Arch, and we'll move each piece of the inclusionary zoning forward with the associated areas as those associated areas receive their zoning updates. So when Marymore gets their update, we'll look at Marymore. When downtown gets their zoning update, we'll look at downtown, and so forth. We're also revisiting the set aside for the AMIs. We know that there's been discussion from the Planning Commission on how they want to approach the equity issue there. And a revision to our scheduling, we propose a study session for the next meeting on the 20th, and we'll really get going in January with a public hearing to start the new year, and then try and see where we go with a report approval and recommendations shortly thereafter. And so just visually, we'll see we do have that opportunity on the 20th before we go back into the public hearing on the 10th. For the 20th and 10th, staff hopes to take all of the feedback we've received, create a new suite of regulations, and then present that so we can go through and see if that meets our stakeholder concerns. But that is the PowerPoint, so I'll welcome Mike to join us, and I'll pull up the issues matrix.
Ian, do we want to go to the public hearing before we go through the issues matrix?
Yes, please.
Thanks. Okay, Glenn, do we want to start with the ones?
There's 2 calls, and then I think there's a couple of people in person.
Okay, let's start with the calls.
Okay. The first would be Justin Bruning. So
Hello?
Hi, is this Justin Burning?
Yes, this is Justin Bruning.
Great. You're on with the Planning Commission for our public hearing on housing. You have approximately 35 minutes, so go ahead. And for the record,
All right,
if you could
thank
give
you.
us your name and address.
Yes, my name is Justin Bruning. My address is 15654 Northeast 93rd Way. So regarding the housing regulations, I was in a meeting yesterday with regarding, there was like a neighborhood meeting for the Chelsea Square building, and I asked Tim McCard about any minimums that might be in place regarding purchasable units that the city was working towards, and he told me no. So I guess I'm just here to say that maybe we should consider putting in some kind of percentage that we should shoot for when we're looking at getting replacements for basically when we're upzoning places or something like that. We should take advantage of the fact that there was a Senate bill passed at the beginning of the year, Senate Bill 5058, that made it easier to build condominiums. And I think we should be taking advantage of that and basically trying to promote building just purchasable units for residents. Obviously, the cost for purchasing is a lot higher, shows that there's a large demand for that, and I just think we need to try and actually get that codified in somewhere that, you know, we actually try and build those units, that there's something in there so that we have the ability for people to buy their own house, in a sense. That's really about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next will be Cliff Cawthon from Habitat for Humanity. So let me just give that a call.
Yeah, hello.
Is this Cliff Cawthon?
Yes, this is. I
Uh,
presume this is the Redmond Planning Commission.
This is the Redmond Planning Commission. You're on with our public hearing on housing regulations. So if you could state your name and address for the record, you'll then have 3 to 5 minutes to testify in our public hearing.
Excellent, thank you. So my name is Cliff Cawthon, he, him pronouns, and I am the Advocacy and Policy Manager for Habitat for Humanity of Seattle, King, Kansas counties, which is located at 500 Notches Avenue Southwest in Renton. But we build throughout the county. So I appreciate the time to speak to you tonight, and first of all, I want to congratulate you on a job well done on these documents. I believe that this is definitely going in the right direction, and what I would encourage the Planning Commission to consider is thinking about affordable home ownership as part of this this effort to make sure that there are affordable units in the city of Redmond and that everyone has a safe, decent, affordable place to live. So there are a few things that I've been looking at the memos on the draft plans for the housing regulations for Redmond 2050. So first of all, I would encourage you to consider expanding the definition around allowing for affordable housing on faith-owned land to faith and nonprofit-owned land. So in other jurisdictions, particularly Bellevue, for example, we were able to work with Planning Commission there to allow for that code amendment to allow for the use, or rather the locating of affordable housing, particularly affordable home ownership opportunities on faith and nonprofit-owned land. And we've actually partnered with Holy Cross Lutheran in order to develop our Orchard Gardens developments, which will include a number of townhomes and cottage homes. That being said, I also want to applaud you for your efforts towards really trying to do it right when it comes to inclusionary zoning. However, one thing I would also ask you to consider is that for affordable housing, or rather affordable home ownership providers and developers, as many of Redmond residents have discussed tonight, that there are barriers to producing the kind of condominiums, townhomes, duplexes, and other first-time home buying options that people are looking for throughout the city. And one of the tools that will be very useful in terms of developing this is through inclusionary zoning policy. And while there's need at the 50% ban, that for it to be feasible for affordable home ownership as well as affordable housing development in general, that lifting the AMI level to 80% AMI will allow for more flexibility for affordable home ownership. Developers, not just like Habitat, but also other community land trust organizations, so on and so forth. And then last but not least, I would simply encourage you, which there's a lot of this in these documents, but there are a number of residential zones that according to what I understand, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that still the plan is not to allow for certain multifamily units. And I would simply say that in order to really address this housing crisis, we are going to need to utilize all various types of housing, and particularly multifamily housing, not just in the form of 50 to 100 to 200 unit high-rise buildings, but also mid-rise buildings as well, or what we call middle housing. And HB 1110 is a great tool and resource that we passed, that a whole chorus of housing advocates came together along with state legislators to pass in this previous legislative session. So I, again, want to applaud you for your efforts on this, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. That's all the phone. Okay. All right, and it looks like we have one person signed in for the public hearing, Tim Jackson. And again, for the record, state your name and address.
Okay, thank you. Tim Jackson. I'm here on behalf of the owners of the Redmond Inn. We're at 15015 Main Street in Bellevue, Washington, 98007. Brian Franklin, the company president, submitted a letter today to all of you. I hope you get a chance to read it. I want to echo what he said, though, and it was wonderful to be at the last meeting, listening to your conversations and positions and the things you're thinking about. was really excited to hear things about, not wanting to kind of break the system, but you obviously have policy goals in mind. And that's really exciting. And we applaud you on that. And frankly, we applaud you on seeking to find more affordable housing for the community of Redmond and helping the east side at large. The one thing that was talked about there that I think we kind of felt maybe we could have a help in was talking about who would pay for it. And that is a very complicated topic. And, there's going to be a lot of different conversations and weighing different proposals about that. But one of the comments that was brought up during that time was the landowners. And there were some comments there about 1990, and we just kind of thought, well, if there's a place where maybe we could interject something, intelligent to say it was there. Because one of the things to think about is how much East King County has evolved over the last 30 years. And I don't know if there's anywhere else in America that has evolved in the way that East King County has. And frankly, a lot of that applause goes to folks like you and Redmond and the leadership in Redmond and how amazing you've created these communities and how much people want to live here. And frankly, you're also winning on employment and businesses. And so the number of developable areas in Redmond today is drastically reduced than it was even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I remember talking with Planner Lee a long time ago when we were working on a property in downtown Redmond, and they were really excited because they'd passed like 3,000 new residents in the downtown. And I think we're well past 10,000 now. So what's happening during that course is that maybe a retail property or an industrial property, they might have had like 15 buildings around them competing for tenants, and the income streams wasn't seeing as much inflation as historical. And you could come in there and you had a better shot at getting a development site because that person might be more willing to sell. But with more density and less sites, now all of a sudden that industrial building is like, well, I'm one of only 5 industrial buildings left. And these people have to have a business here, and they want to be next to a park, and they want to be next to light rail. And getting that property away from those people is very difficult. The other aspect of that is excise tax, regulations, income taxes, all that different stuff. And as time goes on, a lot of families have these buildings, and they depreciate these buildings down to where, in our world, we say they don't have a basis, which means that every dollar they sell a building for is a 100% tax gain. And they kind of look at you like, why would we sell this building? We don't want a big tax bill. We don't want a big excise tax bill. And you kind of try to talk them into it. And really, at the end of the day, it really boils down to how much are you willing to pay me to go through the pain of selling this thing. And it's very, very challenging. East King County is one of the most challenging markets to buy property in the country. It's extremely difficult, and we're running, frankly, out of kind of family people to sell, and it's becoming even more institutional, which makes it even harder. So, it's just we have to be careful when we assume that these developers are, A, even going to be able to go in and get those sites, but B, thinking how difficult that's going to be. And so, that being said, we obviously understand that development and developers and companies like ours are going to have to play a role in that. But I just want to be cautious about, when you think about the pie of who's all going to play ball, the land sellers, in my opinion, aren't going to be as big of that pie as they even would have been 5 years ago. So, but again, the conversation on the 15th was wonderful. I applaud all of you for your thoughts and comments that night. It was excellent hearing you. We applaud your goals, and again, thank you for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you. And I believe that's everybody who signed up. I propose that we close the public comment, the public hearing for verbal testimony, and keep it open for written. Is that amenable to everybody? Okay. And now, Ian, we will go on to the issues matrix.
Thank you. So the first open item related to the timing of implementation. Oh, Zoom? Oh, is that tiny little font not doing it? Now we can see. All right. Thank you for that. So this goes to the discussion the commission was having about what are the options for implementing these new regulations related to inclusionary zoning. Pioneer approaches all at once. At the previous meeting, Arch was asked to provide kind of as much of a scientific analysis as they could on this, given our regional context, and to provide a recommendation. And I believe the recommendation is included. Yes. A pioneer approach based on the number of units or implementing the changes simultaneously with the upzone.
I think this issue can be closed, but it's something that I think we would have to discuss as a commission later, but from information perspective, this issue can be closed. Does that make sense, Chair? Can we do that?
Yes, we can close it in that it's answered your question. What exactly are you saying we still have to discuss about it?
Because eventually we would have to discuss whether the pioneer approach is that would come as part of the recommendations, right, in the report. So as long as a commission, we are getting that, we have that information to make the decision, I think we can close this.
We're going to create a new draft of all of this for the commission next time. Which direction would you like us to go for the next draft for this implementation? Do we want to include pioneer language in it, or?
Commissioner Van Nymen.
So I'd like to really understand the difference between the approach in terms of saying that it's number of units versus time, or it's both. You know, it's my understanding that there's been approaches elsewhere where there can be, it's like it's not limited, it's not a first come, first serve with the number of units, that like as soon as you're done with the units, that you're done, that it also could be extended based on time depending on the economy at the time, right? I mean, the whole goal of this is to make sure that we've got ourselves enough wiggle room to make sure that we're not blowing things up in the short term, right? That we're trying to address a long-term policy in the current environment where that policy isn't really feasible in the short term, short-term economics. So if we want to get the policy on the book as a long-term planning endeavor, we need to have enough room up front to make sure that we're not going to damage housing supply in the short term, right? That's the whole goal of this. And so I really want to understand the trade-offs between the different approaches.
Commissioner Weston.
So I just wanted to go on the record as being firmly in favor of the pioneer approach without exceptions. That I think that we really want to reward people who are moving in the direction that we're hoping Redmond will grow early on. I don't really see the advantage to like holding back the hard stuff that we have to do for a later time when we have less flexibility. I see the advantage of building what we hope to have built as early as the market conditions allow. And back to a point from, I think, almost 2 months ago now, I don't think we're going to manage to time the market as a commission. I don't think that's our job. I think our job is to really set a plan that's predictable, that developers can run all of their math, figure out all of their angles, because that's their job. They're very good at it. And then we will be here waiting with a predictable response. Early projects get in with a little bit of an incentive. Later projects know what the ground will be that they're working with later. And then people can come in as it suits their land and their goals, frankly, and work around that. So that's just where I stand. But I wanted to just lay that out, that I think, to me, that's rational.
I tend to agree. I don't want to get in the business of trying to guess the economy and set future dates. I think the pioneer approach makes the most sense. Commissioner Parna.
I agree, but I also think the pioneer approach should clearly delineate rental units from ownership units, because I think we're hearing from the public about homeownership in the affordable housing space. So maybe there's a slightly different approach we take for rental versus ownership. I don't know if that's been done before, but I think in the last meeting we talked about not wanting to time the market, and Mike was very kind enough to kind of explain the arch reasoning behind it, and I'm totally for the pioneer approach. But we need to be really cautious that we don't give away the keys to the house. I mean, pardon the the bad pun, but it's basically we need to see that it gets people through the hump, but it's not necessarily something that is so large that I don't know how that number is going to be arrived at. But this has enough information per se for eventually a recommendation, I suppose. So, yeah, I don't know. Can we close the issue in terms of the information presented? It's my issue.
I think we can close it. I think what Ian is asking for is a direction that the Planning Commission wishes to go.
Yes, please.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is Susan and I are firmly in favor of the pioneer approach. You are in favor of the pioneer approach. Is there a consensus on the pioneer approach? Yes. You have a direction.
Thank you. And we'll look into the that split by tenureship. Okay, and number 3 is kind of one of the big ones about the whole offsets of affordable housing, who pays for what. At our previous discussion, we kind of wanted to dive a bit deeper into, well, how much are each of these components offsetting and how much? We are going to continue to do our analysis for Overlake, so we can try and get those pieces for you. But it's such a knot that you pull on. So like, we often hear from our development stakeholders that, every parking stall they don't have to make saves, $60,000 sometimes. But then some of the lenders will actually want to see a minimum amount of parking regardless of what the city requires. So there's all these pieces, and I think the 2 pieces of high-level takeaway for this meeting is that we're going to continue to do that analysis. We're going to try and bring you the specific numbers at the next Planning Commission meeting, and that we will try and get all of that done in a way that we can take action on this and hopefully get to a consensus.
Commissioner Nueva Camina.
Ian, have we ever gotten a consensus on what the parking stalls actually cost? Because we've had developers come in saying 40,000, 100,000, one went double that, leaving me with a question of how much does a parking stall actually cost?
Well, part of it depends on whether it's surface or below ground. Below ground is very expensive.
Yeah.
So it can run anywhere from, my understanding is it can cost anywhere from 15,000 to even 100,000 is on the high end, but there's the land costs and the building costs.
Thank you.
Commissioner Van Nyman. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I think with this, I think we need to kind of look at it in terms of the, oh man, I just spaced out. Okay, I'm going to cede my turn. I'll come back to it.
No, everybody's spacing out. But anyway, that's my understanding on, unless Ian or somebody else has more information about the cost of parking. It really depends on what kind of parking you're talking about. Commissioner Van Nyman.
Can you explain how, when you say you're going to go off and do this, is there, I know the city has had strong relationships with the developers. And so when you say you're going to come up with some numbers, because what I want to see is the math on saying, this is how much additional cost the developer is going to assume in this new equation. And these are the things that economically offset that. And I would like to have some understanding that the developers are in agreement with that. There's a challenge here with the way we hear public comment, right? There's no dialogue that really occurs. And that everybody is in agreement that those are true statements. Because there seems to be a lack of trust from what I'm seeing with the development community and what's going on with the city at the moment, that you don't seem to believe them when they come to you and say this isn't going to work. So that puts me in a position of saying, I really like for you guys to come to us and say, we all agree, ideally, even if there's going to be some pain, like maybe there's a lot of development, relationships that have been developed within this community. And I would like to see those leveraged in trying to come up with a solution.
Commissioner Parna.
I finally got the mojo back. I think it's a good thing that we're just kind of focusing on Overlake right now, and because any of these numbers may not be the same anywhere else. So just zooming into one zone, it actually makes a lot more sense. And I think if the numbers add there, maybe it's the pilot for a whole bunch of things that the city's trying to do, right? So if the numbers work there, then we can kind of translate those lessons elsewhere. So I think it's a really good thing that we are zooming in. So just want to say that. Thank you.
This comment is really kind of a reaction to Tara's comment. Is there a standard way in which costs are determined? Is there a common standard that we can agree on between the city and developers? And so when we hear costs, we have a unified way of understanding how those are calculated. Because I think that then helps us understand, that also helps build some sort of trust. I don't think we'll ever get to consensus between developers in the city because the way the math, the way the economy works. But I think we can at least aspire to a standard for how we calculate so that I understand what you mean. I understand what is meant. And we can then kind of move beyond the trust factor and really kind of focus on the issues.
I'm hearing a lot of support for trying to walk through some of the numbers itself. And I will say just a few things for the process. We absolutely collaborate with the development stakeholders. For the Happy Grant, we kept going through iterations with them. And I will say there was consensus on the inputs. So what are the rates at the time? What is the range of parking stall costs? How much are construction costs? What's our loan to values? All of that was an explicit consent saying this is pretty much right between all this. And I think we also have consensus between the city and developers that nothing is feasible right now. Like it's kind of already blown up in the current. So we have consent on those, or consensus on those two pieces at the moment. And one of the strengths that Mike and Arch is bringing to the table is that we're getting even more inputs because they have work done from other consultants that also did market studies and collaboration with developers to pull in all of that data. So on a project by project basis, the numbers may not line up because every project is just so unique, but holistically as kind of a generalized model, we feel that the inputs, the math itself, and the conclusions are all reliable. And I think it's the kind of policy discourse that comes from that is where there's a disconnect. Mike, do you have any context you'd want to add about the other consultant path?
I don't think I want to add anything to what you just said. I think you just captured a lot of really good points right there.
Yeah, I'll note that we're just watching the big development in Woodinville blow up, which had been in process for a couple of years. So, I mean, the environment right now is just difficult. And
sorry, I'm going to add something that, without being called on for that, there's no affordable housing requirement in that project.
Well, but your point is that it's a challenging environment to start with.
Mm-hmm. But the environment, I mean, the economic environment is not a static thing. It's constantly moving. Commissioner Parna.
I would also like to, I would like to thank staff for all the community outreach and the reaching out to the development community. I do not believe that there's a lack of trust. I think we're quibbling over the specifics, and that's okay. I don't think it's a more fundamental issue than that, so I just want to put it out there.
Okay, so what do you need from this, Ian? Do you have what you need from this? Do we keep it open? Do we close it? What do you need?
My interpretation is that just try and bring some more of the math next time. But it seems like the other components of this are candidates for closing. The discussion, we can close it, and then I'll bring forward the new piece that we can go over.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you. Oh, and number 4 was the Marymore case study. Now this was really fun to dive into, and as a little bit of a reminder, the kind of current, or the most recent Marymore, it's only been around for a handful of years. And
I worked on it.
So it's in the late 20-teens, right? And so we're getting some big projects coming in that are mainly coming at the largest sites, the largest parcels that were available. And then, of course, the pandemic hits. And everything just kind of stops. All the projects that were realized and brought up in the example of this as the affordable housing started well before the pandemic actually came. So it's a small sample size, but we think some of the statistics we shared in this issues matrix about how, it's the 950 units, it's 50% of the total anticipated growth for Marymore. The Redmond 2050 process isn't actually touching the growth targets there much. So with the limited information we have, it certainly doesn't seem like a disaster, but it's only a handful of years, which is nothing in the terms of development.
You can close.
Thank you. The changes to the fee in lieu program. So we received some community priorities expressed by the Planning Commission about kind of adding more specific parameters to what fee in lieu is, and we've tried to integrate that into the draft. So we would be interested to hearing your thoughts and reactions to the information provided in the matrix, and of course the text itself.
Commissioner Parna.
I think it does the job beautifully, because I think it hits on all my concerns that we're not going to just do this indiscriminately. There has to be a project, and the 10% over what would be the required as what I think it simplifies it beautifully. I think it's great. So wonderful.
I just wanted to say thank you for going into depth on this scenario, because I think it sounds like it does not come up very often. But I think minds will rest easier knowing that this is not a loophole that's just waiting there, like dangling, waiting to be a problem. So I appreciate that.
Commissioner Vanden.
So I do have a question, and perhaps Mike can help with this. This is not with regard to this specific language, but kind of just the overall fee in lieu program in general. When we talk about all of the different options this is a little bit off of the matrix, for addressing this issue, and that there are, say, less than 50% AMI types of solutions that are occurring. Don't those, if the city wants to put in money to help facilitate those, wouldn't that come from like a fee in lieu type of program? Like if you had a nonprofit that wanted to build something, wouldn't that be a funding source for that? Because we're not looking at anything less than 50% AMI here, right?
I want to be sure I understand your question, but I think what you're asking is if a nonprofit or somebody's building deeply affordable units, usually 100% of the building is affordable units, then that requires funding, and that it generally comes from, a big portion of that could be city funding. The city has contributed to the Arches Trust Fund with general funds and community development block grant funds, and now more recently with supplemented that with these fee and lieux from the 3 projects. So yes, that's where that fee and lieu money goes.
Right, and so I'm curious, like, why we're so focused on there not being a loophole. Like, this would actually be, if the project is teed up, these are good dollars to spend, right?
It wouldn't be a significant part. I mean, fee and lieu is not a significant part of the development money. It's just not.
But we heard that in Seattle, the developers are paying into that's how they're.
It's still not a significant part of the development money. It's just not providing that big. I mean, my understanding is like long-term, was it the long-term housing tax credits from the federal government is the biggest chunk of the money.
Low-income housing tax credits
Yeah,
are far bigger source of funding than local city funding.
Right.
But I would suggest that the Together Center wouldn't have happened if not for the fee and lieu dollars that the city was able to kick in.
There were a lot of different funding streams that went into the Together Center, including, individuals donating. Yeah, they did a capital campaign, so.
The fee in lieu right now, the way at least I read it, is that if there is a project identified and somebody is building market rate units and wants to do a fee in lieu, at that point it is a consideration. But it's not going to float around as a fund if there is no identified project. And that's what Mike was clarifying last time for us. So I think what we wanted to know is if there's a fee in lieu and there's no identified project, where does the money go, right? So that loophole has been closed. But what happens is that, like Sherry said, the funding for those deeply affordable housing projects have to come from somewhere else. It cannot be from these, because in the long run, the numbers will be lower because we won't get the higher AMI units, and we are still scrounging for land or funding to complete a deeper affordable thing. So we'll be in no man's land. So this is offering that option should there be something the city has identified.
Commissioner Weston.
I also just want to kind of avoid using Together Center as a model going forward for Redmond, because that really only worked because they already owned the land.
Yeah.
And we don't, as far as I know, we don't have a comparable, other option like that in Redmond. That was pretty unique on its own. So it's a wonderful project, and it means a lot to Redmond, but we shouldn't base this particular policy
on it
around that example, because it just doesn't really apply. And I also, maybe loophole was a little bit of a red flag of a term. Maybe what I would like to say is that instead that it's ambiguous. And I think that this clarifies something that previously was ambiguous, and I appreciate that attention to detail.
Can we close this?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I do think this discussion really touches on something really important to everything related to affordable housing, which is there are trade-offs. Our affordable housing can't solve everything. The inclusionary zoning won't do it on its own. The MFTE won't. The fee and lieu won't. At the end of the day, there's going to be way more demand for affordable housing than the city is able to provide. So it's just about framing it in that equity consideration. And I think the input from the commission last time on the fee in lieu really helps ensure that we're being responsible stewards of the public dollar and focusing on those lower AMIs through those projects, that it helps realize some of the equity goals that have been a key component of the Redmond 2050 themes throughout the whole process. So thank you for all that. Okay. These are some of the comments that were emailed to us. So they were before the 11:15 conversation, but we weren't able to get it into the matrix until afterwards. Commissioner Parna, this is discussing about that whole timing the market and the time value money.
Sort of repeat of the old one, so we can close this out. Thank you.
Thank you. So issue 10 is a discussion of the affordable housing parking allocation discussion. And it's, there was a request from the commission to explore if we could prioritize offering the limited affordable housing parking allocations to the lowest AMI units first. One of the challenges with that is that leasing does not occur simultaneously. Like, even if it's just a day off, it creates a lot of implementation challenges. I researched to see if there was a way we could just kind of like hold off and just be like, okay, after X amount of time, then you lease all the parking stalls at once. Yeah, as you can imagine, that was not an opportunity. So at this point, the recommendation from staff is that it just would, it's not feasible.
Commissioner Parna.
I understand the challenges, so I just had a follow-up question on this one, and I think I've emailed this to you, is can we see if this is possible at all in the initial lease up when the project is launched, whether this can be something that can be done in the first round? Because a lot of, like, from what I understand, if you are leasing at 50% and you can go up to 70% in your income, like it could grow, but you're recertifying each year. So let's say you're coming in at 50%. It's a nice thing to have at that point, right? So I'm just wondering if we could do it that way. If we have a range of units, which is 50 and 80 and all in the same go. Otherwise, it's first come, first serve, right? If it's all at the same level of affordability. So I'm just wondering if you could put that in the initial lease up somewhere in the covenant or something. I don't know.
Mike, how does the initial lease up for Arch candidates work?
Well, what happens when when a new project is opening up and we're helping the property management with the marketing by sending out emails to people who are on our mailing list. And so, then it's kind of a first come, first serve situation. And what I would foresee happening if there was a condition that people, if there were, 2 tiers of affordable units and somebody who qualified at 80 AMI but not 50 AMI came in and said, well, I want a parking space also, the property manager might have to say, well, I have to hold those off to see if anybody at 50 AMI units need those. And then if I'm that 80 AMI renter, I'm going to have to go somewhere else where I know that I can get the parking. So that's why I say that I don't think it would work.
Thank you. Yeah, you can close this, Ian.
Okay.
The issue 11 was a discussion about the amendments in the first public hearing, the one on the 15th, related to 2157 about eliminating the spacing and density limits for emergency housing and emergency shelter. The primary concern there was clustering. The removal of those limitations helps comply with state law and move forward with our land capacity analysis. We also discussed how the opportunities for sites are, it's one of those conditions where, okay, now there's more opportunity, and because of the economic conditions, it's really hard to find sites that would be appropriate. So it seems unlikely that clustering would occur, and at this point, if there's a need for it, we felt that it would help provide those equitable outcomes by not limiting opportunities.
This.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Issues 12. So this is a candidate for this kind of new approach where we're going to tackle everything kind of in each zone update. So we'll make sure these are included with the neighborhood residential zones coming to you in January.
Thank you. Yeah, that you can close this as long as it's answered.
As long as it comes back.
Yes.
Very soon. Okay, issue 13. This was about a provision that's in our inclusionary zoning, which requires that the affordable units integrated into the market developments are of similar quality, finishes, interiors as the market rates. Right? We don't want the market rate one to be, just some kind of diminished, underappreciated little sibling. And so one of the proposals from the commission was if we could add the kind of electrification, the durability, the sustainability components as a provision here. And we are still looking at the overlake regulations because so much is changing there regarding sustainability and building performance and all those components that we think this may be covered by the initial components. We know that it would have to be factored into the economic offset if this created a burden above and beyond what is already there. So we're still reviewing overlake, but we think that it should be covered.
Thank you, Ian. I think I'd like to know more. And the reason I put this, just to be clear, is not because of sustainability as a thing, but more in terms of operational costs to the residents who are going to be in these affordable units. When we talk about durable finishes, if they have to replace everything in 3 years, whether it's especially if they're homeowners or even if they're renters and they are going to be there, the cost burden shouldn't be there. It should be something that lasts and something that will stand basic maintenance and not peel away or whatever, right? So, and whether it's water or whether it's energy savings, it's more about the operational cost to the residents. That was the lens. So any information on this? So could we keep this open, please, to give us more on this one?
You got it. And thank you for that additional context. Yeah, the operational cost is a huge component of housing costs.
Commissioner Nueva Comida.
Thank you, Chair. On that, Ian, is there, I think that it's easy to, for me, because I can't speak for anybody else, but it's easy for me to make assumptions that if it is inclusionary units, if it's an inclusionary development, that the units would be similar. However, what I've learned is that they're specific units. So, like arbitrarily, unit 107 will always be an arch unit forever and ever, and that's that. Going back to and I would assume that 107 is the same as 207. But what I'm learning is that that's not the case, that there are different finishes, there's different things that are being done, yes?
Thanks for asking that. That's something that we don't get to talk about enough, and I think lingers in people's brains. We do a lot of the code, because the code is written the way it is. Well, let me say, it's a little bit different. It works out a little bit different for home ownership than it does for rental. So for home ownership, we are careful about making sure that we actually do walkthroughs and kind of our own inspection to make sure that the finishes and fits and appliances or whatever goes into the new units are of, entry-level quality for Redmond. They don't have to be the same level of materials or appliances as for market rate units. But because of we want to help the owners with long, ownership costs over the life of their ownership, then we look out for that kind of thing. In rental housing, it's a little bit different because although the affordable units are designated, they're not necessarily fixed for life. It may happen, as we talked about last time, it may happen that somebody becomes ineligible over time because their income grows. And so the property manager will designate a different unit. And this doesn't, I wouldn't say this happens a lot, but it's not uncommon. And so and because of just the general construction costs involved, a builder is not typically going to pick out 10% of the units and say, I want you to put, linoleum or whatever kinds of finishes in those 10 units, but all the rest is going to be a higher grade. They'll, finish them out all the same. Now, a recent phenomena is that, and I mean, like in the last 5 years or so, is that especially with taller buildings, more people with higher incomes, then multifamily developers are catering to people with a certain number of luxury units at the upper floors. Mm-hmm. And we have said that that's okay because to begin with, we allow them to, although we want them to scatter the affordable units in the buildings, we'll let them do up to, if it's a 10% set aside, we'll let them put up to 20% of the affordable unit. Up to 20% of a floor can be affordable units, is what I'm trying to say. So usually the affordable units don't reach up to those upper floors anyways. Mm-hmm. So if they want to put a penthouse up there and really high-end kitchen fixtures and so forth, we don't object to that kind of thing.
Mike, are there standards to where the workmanship, because of course in any kind of building, your labor costs is the biggest lever to push and pull, because you can't really do a whole lot about cost of goods, but you can on labor. So is there like standards or protocols or something that needs to be followed as far as like the quality of skills of labor? Because I could put a lesser skilled person in on an affordable unit, and then things aren't exactly up to par, but it's close enough. So are there standards to where they need to be, or is that a lever that could be leveraged?
To be honest, that's not something I've heard discussed before. I think that also goes back to the efficiency of finishing out the units in a similar manner. You're going to have the same workers working throughout the building,
okay,
doing their what they're most skilled at doing. And to be building in Redmond, I think anyway, is that and developers can address this better than I can, but I don't think they're trying to cut corners.
Thank you.
I don't think it really cuts corners to do that.
No, I was thinking more of just what are the possible levers that can be pushed and pulled on costs overall.
Yeah.
We haven't found this. I mean, we've got our eye out for it, but we have not run into a real problem with it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll keep that open. and I'll research more of the overlay components. Issue 14 was a discussion of just pulling up the housing targets again to see how much of the housing is needed at those below 50% AMI levels.
So thank you so much for including this. This was, I think we're having concern that if we were at 80%, then that we'd leave the 80% behind. And then the one comment, or actually one comment and one question I wanted to add before closing it. The comment was just, this is very helpful to me, especially keeping in mind that we're looking at a regional problem. So I'd really like to see Redmond coming in at that 50%. Like, we know that a lot of people are going to be aiming at that 80. So to me, just having this chart illustrates the need, both in Redmond and then I'm assuming around us. It's not just us. So I really appreciate that. And then the follow-up question was, I was looking, I couldn't find any sort of dashboard, whether it would be King County or something else, but just whether or not cities are meeting these targets or whether they have anything in the pipeline, or if, because these are just huge numbers. And so to try to look at this and be like, we need all of so many buildings worth of affordable housing. But I don't have any, I was trying to just suss out, like, I'm sure everyone's just barely scraping through right now, but like how dire is it? Which cities are like leaping ahead? Is Redmond one of them? I hope so. So, but I didn't know if there are any dashboards that you're aware of, or if this is a future need.
Jeff posted in the chat where the progress will be. These targets for affordable housing were just adopted recently, but Jeff has a link to where these targets will be tracked.
Amazing. Thank you, Jeff. All right, so you can definitely close.
Commissioner Aparna?
Actually, I don't know if I want to attach it to this one or whether it makes sense to have a different issue matrix, but for me, the big question is what options do the 60%, the 70% AMI, even the 80% AMI currently, we are planning for the 50%. We've got units which are getting into play at 80%. For me, I'm just trying to understand what the options are for the 60 and 70%. Because we know there will be people at 50%, right? So it's not like, oh, there's going to be empty units at 50, so we're going to give it to the 60 or the 70. So just curious what the other options are. And I don't know if you want to piggyback on this comment, but whether it's a separate comment, but I feel it's in the same vein of understanding what happens to those others in the table.
Yeah, and I think this does go together nicely with issue 15. And I think it comes back to the fact that these tools in front of us cannot help address the entire problem. We have to choose based on our community priorities, our Redmond 2050 themes, how we want to calibrate these components. Now, there may be an opportunity. Typically, rents decrease as buildings age, and because Redmond has experienced a relatively high production in recent years, the last decade or so, there is more of an opportunity for some of those to eventually come down to 80% AMI rents. It still could be tough depending on how much production we actually get done, so I don't want to say that's like the solution to it, but there's certainly more of a chance for it happening, of market rate rents getting to an 80% level than a 50% level.
Trying to understand at the get-go, we don't have anything which says 60%, for instance.
Yeah.
Right? So should we add that to this, or it's a separate comment?
I think it's part of 15, not 14.
Okay. No, it's actually not 15. It's not.
Well,
It's not 15?
It's not quite. Because.
Well, I'm a little confused because there is a column in this graph that is 60%.
Yes.
It's the greater than 50, less than 80.
Right, so that's what we need to plan for, but we have 50% in our proposals, and we have the 80% which is there. So my question is what's happening in the middle? And I don't know if that's going on the graph, or we can keep that as a separate topic, Ian. I don't know. Susan?
We've brought this up before, which is what seems to be the proposal at this point is that 80% AMI that we've been working with, that supply would effectively be capped. That based, if you went with a 50% model, this is my understanding of what we're looking at here, is that you're only looking at the 50% AMI subsidy units. You're leaving behind the 50 to 80% people. They have to fight it out with the supply that already exists. Is that right?
Well, the 80 AMI requirements would still be there for home ownership, is that right?
That's one of the recommendations we're exploring with your analysis, yeah. We're hoping that through the expansion of a variety of middle housing choices, increased density, more apartments, that some of those 50 to 80% AMI households will be served. Some may not. Redmond is a high cost of living area. King County is a high cost of living area. Most of the households that need affordable housing are going to get it through cost-controlled affordable housing. And we only have so many tools to help so many people.
Okay. I'm going to suggest that we stop here for now and move on to the next topic, since we're coming back to this on the 20th, because we still have another public hearing to get to.
Sounds good. We'll take your direction. Thank you for the conversation, and we'll get those new consolidated regulations in front of you.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. And thank you, Mike, is that his name? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so now we'll move on to Redmond 2050 Green Building Program and Overlake Incentive Package Public Hearing and Study Session. And I will turn it over to Jenny Liebeck, Becky Fry, and Lauren Alpert. I don't know who's going to start us off here.
I'm going to start you off.
Okay, Jeff's going to start us off.
Surprise. Becky couldn't be here tonight, and so I'm going to do her part of the presentation, not as good as she would have, of course. And I am joined by Jenny Liebeck as well, who is on the screen. I see her now. And we'll just kind of recap to set the stage for the public hearing that is scheduled for tonight. And the very first thing I'm going to do is turn it over to Jenny because the very first thing I'm going to do is share my screen so you can see the slides. Then I'll turn it over to Jenny to recap the green building program.
Perfect. While those are coming up, I can, again, Jenny Liebeck, the Sustainability Manager here at the city. Thanks so much for having me, and sorry I can't be there with you all in person. Again, so as Jeff said, I just want to briefly introduce the kind of a reminder about the Green Building Incentive Program, and then touch briefly on the high-level changes that have been made to the program since we were before you last month. Turn to the next slide. Perfect. So just as a reminder, so the goal for this refresh was to align the green building priorities with our environmental sustainability action plan, since the ESAP basically identified our clear goals and expectations as a city. We also wanted to ensure that anything that we're incentivizing is going above and beyond code. And then finally, we also wanted to create a consistent kind of standard for a green building program that can be referenced across the zoning districts. So throughout this process, we have heard from stakeholders the desire to keep the general or the kind of citywide green building incentive program voluntary, to focus on outcomes, not necessarily just certification programs. and also to create a program that allows developers to basically identify the techniques that are most relevant to their project. And then also, through this process, this is also the time that the energy code has been updated, and that has also, gone through some significant changes. And so we did just hear some concerns to be mindful of the impacts of the energy code as well through our update. And so what you're seeing before you today, works very hard to kind of thread the goals that I just outlined, as well as the stakeholder feedback. And I think we've gotten pretty close. So again, we have a voluntary program. It's maintaining a points-based structure, which allows it to flex with incentive programs like the Overlake, and kind of be able to plug into that. We did not identify any specific incentives through this process, but basically, again, we're creating that standard so that the specific zoning codes can identify the incentives, or the land use incentives that are most relevant to that zoning district. We're also establishing a performance period, again, focusing on that outcome piece to make sure that the projects are doing what they say they are. And then we also created a penalty to ensure that there was some accountability with this. And then we also created an appendix where we outlined a lot of the program details to be as clear about the expectations as possible. And so since the biggest changes that we made since we saw you last was very much reflected in the embodied carbon element. So we heard two pieces of feedback, primarily one around water conservation and the need to more robustly address water, as well as making tweaks and adding embodied carbon. So you will have found attached to the agenda meeting minutes a memo about the water conservation considerations. And so we did not end up including any additional water strategies within the existing Green Building Incentive Program because the state plumbing code has the most recent update rather has a lot of strict water conservation standards, which is consistent with a lot of the feedback we heard in terms of, incentivizing or pushing water sense fixtures and things like that. And so we feel that the approach that we have identified of leveraging Appendix M of the plumbing code, which is about sizing of the pipes, and this is specific to multifamily. This water strategy is, again, specific to multifamily and not commercial. And right now, not specific to mixed use, but I know Commissioner Apartment, you have submitted some comments about that. So again, the biggest change here is that, we right now have just made some tweaks and added some additional context about, or kind of expectations for the embodied carbon piece. So I think I'll leave it at that for now and hand it back to Jeff. Oh, and you got it. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Jenny. So on the Overlake side, the incentive program, the goal is to advance community goals to accommodate new building typologies, specifically towers. The Overlake incentive package brings all incentives into one place for Overlake, and also improves flexibility over what is in the code today by creating a menu of options. What we have heard thus far is that some positive feedback on the calculator that we've shared with the Planning Commission, and also a desire to continue to be able to test the program. That's a very basic overview, because I know you've seen it in detail already. The incentive program is future focused, and what that really means is that if you are building, if you're a developer and you're building a podium project, you probably don't need to use it. And so most things that have been built in the past few years wouldn't need to take advantage of this incentive program. So its future focus is focused on incentivizing mass timber buildings and towers, the kinds of buildings that we will need over time to accommodate growth. It provides extra incentives for catalyst and pilot projects. It provides flexibility for smaller projects, and it also provides the opportunity to create a custom package of incentives for projects that might have special profiles. There are some recent edits to make you aware of. We removed the sections on parking landscaping, and open space. And it's not because we don't care about them, it's because they're going to be in other chapters. So the parking will actually come to you in January. Landscaping and open space, I don't know exactly when that's going to come to the Planning Commission, but those whole chapters will come so that they can all be adopted with the overlay code later in 2024. So they're not before you tonight. And then the development standards table was expanded to show maximum height with incentives and some note updates, including FAR calculation clarifications and exemptions for publicly accessible open space were added. A small exemption to minimum building height for building entrances. Building height exemptions for top floor amenities to allow an additional floor. The top floor includes rooftop amenities, but not to exceed the 30 stories. And a clarification that 100% lot coverage in Overlake Village does not mean that you don't need to meet other requirements like addressing your stormwater. So it's the ability to go up to 100%, but you do need to be able to meet your stormwater and open space requirements, which might mean that you don't get to 100%. There is an added item to the mandatory green building items, which is the embodied carbon reduction, which I believe was a point of discussion at a previous Planning Commission meeting. And the incentive package now integrates into the document in full. So the version that was sent in the packet includes the incentive program in full. And there were a couple minor revisions there. Proposed removal of the first right of refusal for new spaces for existing tenants in older spaces. For kind of a lack of a way to enforce or track that administratively. And there is a note, one was edited for open space to address signage at all levels, not just for ground level spaces. So those were the edits in the incentive program. Let's see, in terms of bonuses, as was discussed, I think, at the previous Planning Commission meeting, the idea here that's written into the incentive program is that there is an extra incentive to do things soon. So the idea here is that a number of points that are required to earn certain incentives will go up over time. That idea is in the code. There's even a suggestion of 5 years in the code, but we would need to come back to you with code amendments to actually make that happen 5 years from now. So there's the opportunity to kind of relook at that in 1 year, 3 years, 4 years, and decide how we might want to approach that. The maximum bonus in the TOD focus area, you can get, so again, today you can get everything that you could want at 200 points, but the idea is that that would incrementally increase to 400 points. And the bigger idea here is that the incentive program is a dynamic piece of the code. That doesn't mean we're going to change it every year, because I think that would get disruptive, and people would not be able to count on what the code says, but it does mean we should take a look at it every few years or so as community priorities change about what we want and need in Overlake, and as construction practices change, as just what we need changes. This is in text some of the things that I was talking about already, so I won't dwell on that. And we talked about this too. Sorry, I should have been advancing the slides while I was discussing, but we discussed that, changes to 2112 and 2160. Didn't discuss this in too much detail. So in the design standards, and this was also an attachment in the packet, some amendments related to step backs and spacing. The illustrations have been updated as well. And there have been updates related to floor plates. So all of those, and that's all based on feedback from people who build these kinds of buildings and looked at our code and said, hey, these are some changes you should consider to make this, to improve the viability. So that's the recap of the material for the public hearing, and we can move on to the public hearing.
Okay, so we'll open the public hearing. And it looks like everybody who wanted to speak is here in person. So Rhea Wren, you're first up. And state your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you to everyone here tonight. My name is Rhea Wren. I use she, they pronouns, and I live at 18308 Northeast 107th Street. I serve on the Redmond Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee as a technical advisor, and in general, very much in support of the overlay package and the building code guidelines that we're aiming for here. I did want to emphasize the electrification, efficiency enhancements, and methane phase-outs in these refinements as we move forward with these packages. And today is a prime example of where we're using data-informed planning and action, and we're seeing the results of that comprehensive planning with our heavier rainfall rates today and our flooding being met with mitigation and appropriate response on the ground with what we've done with land use. It's a pivotal moment where bold action is essential right now. The building sector, a major source of GHG greenhouse emissions, offers a significant opportunity for change. And it aligns us with the Washington State Building Code Council, which adopted policy amendments to statewide energy codes for new residential and commercial buildings, and Seattle's building emissions performance standard policy now being approached in our sister city, as well as cities with existing policies on planned methane and petrochemical phase-outs, including Los Angeles, DC, New York, and San Francisco. I just want to emphasize that methane phase-out is vital in new construction moving forward. As a potent greenhouse gas, its warming potential far exceeds carbon dioxide. Eliminating its use in our buildings can significantly contribute to our city's climate goals. Zero emission solutions are now available in market with proven performance in both small scale and large scale buildings, including energy efficiency gains over the long time and emission reductions. The recent COP28 agreement this week among industry leaders to reduce these super pollutants underscores this urgency. This action is projected to decrease industry methane emissions by 80% as soon as 2038. 2023 U.S. National Climate Assessment just recently came out a couple weeks ago. Our city will be debriefing on that, but to paraphrase one section, especially on higher income urban areas such as ours that continue to grow quickly, and as we continue to increase our density, we risk rising total emissions unless these linkages can be changed through mitigation in our planning, and they specifically call out mitigation and adaptation in these areas. In conclusion, I urge the Commission to keep climate action central to all our decisions, as you are. Our building codes should reflect not only current best practices, but also future-proof strategies. This includes integrating renewable energy, enhancing energy efficiency, and building resilience against climate risks and impacts now here. I submitted this comment in writing as well with full citations for your ease of use, and then just want to thank you for your work and dedication on this for the long-term resiliency, sustainability, and health of our community. It's deeply appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. David Morton.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm David Morton, 19934 Northeast Union Hill Road, Redmond, 98053. Redmond's ambitious plan for development presents an opportunity to integrate sustainable and green building techniques. As the city embraces growth, it's crucial to prioritize environmental responsibility, energy efficiency, and community well-being in the development process. To begin with, the incorporation of affordable, energy-efficient design principles is paramount. Buildings should be designed to maximize natural light, reducing the need for artificial lighting and lowering energy consumption. Smart building systems, such as automated lighting and heating controls, can further optimize energy usage. Implementing well-insulated building envelopes will enhance thermal efficiency, minimizing the reliance on heating and cooling systems. Green roofs and walls are another approach that can contribute to sustainability. These features provide insulation, reduce stormwater runoff, and improve air quality. Additionally, green spaces within and around the housing units promote biodiversity, creating a healthier living environment and mitigate the urban heat island effect. Incorporating renewable energy sources is fundamental to achieving a low carbon footprint. Rooftop solar panels can be integrated into the design, harnessing clean energy to power homes and common areas. Furthermore, developments should encourage the use of electric vehicles by installing charging infrastructure and promoting a shift towards sustainable transportation options. Water conservation is a critical aspect of green building. Low-flow fixtures, efficient irrigation systems, and reducing construction dewatering can significantly reduce water consumption. Gray water systems, which reuse water from sinks and showers for non-potable purposes like landscaping, offer an additional avenue for sustainable water management. Development plans should prioritize green and open spaces, fostering a sense of community and well-being. Parks, pedestrian-friendly pathways, and communal gardens not only enhance the quality of life, but also contribute to ecological balance. Utilizing native plants in landscaping helps support local biodiversity and reduces the need for excessive water and maintenance. Waste reduction strategies such as recycling programs and construction waste management play a crucial role in sustainable urban development. Encouraging the use of recycled and locally sourced materials in construction minimizes embodied carbon. Lastly, community engagement is essential for the success of any green building initiative. Educating residents about sustainable practices, promoting green living, and involving the community in decision-making processes contribute to a collective commitment to environmental stewardship. In conclusion, Redmond has a unique opportunity to showcase a model of sustainable development by incorporating energy-efficient design, renewable energy sources, water conservation measures, green spaces, and community engagement. The city can create a vibrant, resilient, and eco-friendly urban environment for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Devin Kellogg.
Good evening, Redmond Planning Commissioners and staff. I'll try to be brief so we can get to Glenn's utilities element sometime.
Don't forget your name and address for the record.
My name is Devin Kellogg. I live in Education Hill. I'm a parent and teacher and a longtime resident. Ever since I witnessed the ravages of climate change on my childhood home, then discovered through the IPCC and NASA and other sound scientific organizations how urgent this issue is for all living things, I have been actively advocating for solutions in our schools, communities, and with the Washington State PTA and with our People for Climate Action group here in Redmond. I'm here today as a resident to testify in the Overlake policies and incentive package, and those some overlap with the affordable housing. First off, I'd like to applaud our talented planning staff for the incredible work you're doing during this time of rapid growth and change. I'd also like to thank Planning Commission for volunteering your time to be a community voice in this process. I deeply appreciate the city's focus on sustainability and for recognizing the major role our built environment plays in the well-being of our residents and in the stability of our climate system. What seems to be missing, however, is the urgency of timely action and a real commitment to changing the structural models that are perpetuating the problem. Combustion heating in buildings is not only the largest source of heat-trapping pollution in our cities, but also the fastest growing source. Plus, combustion fuels leach toxic fumes into our living spaces and pose substantial seismic safety risks. It is firmly established that the best path forward for health, cost, and climate is with energy-efficient electric appliances powered by clean electricity. This provides summer cooling and community resilience opportunities as well. Our state is helping us on this path with strong efficiency standards and clean electricity generation, but we will not succeed in our goals without a rapid phase out of methane, aka natural gas, and other combustion heating fuels in our buildings and homes. Plus, I'm learning from firsthand experience that it is exponentially more costly to retrofit a fossil heating system than to build green from the start. My question is, how can we possibly reach our critical climate goals if electrification is not a basic requirement in all new buildings? Even using Jenny's awesome green building incentive model, go Jenny, in some new buildings, utilities can undermine our goals by subsidizing new gas hookups in others. This approach may be enticing to builders looking for established profit pathways, or cities looking to increase affordable housing by installing cheaper gas appliances, for example. But it's a false solution. All this does is transfer the cost of this gas infrastructure onto the tenants and other remaining ratepayers. It queues up costly retrofits for owners and locks in more climate costs to our society, including increased costs we're seeing for building materials, labor, and insurance. It's a vicious and doomed cycle that we need to break now. There are ways to structure our policies to accomplish our goals. Several cities and jurisdictions are already doing so by limiting or strongly disincentivizing new gas hookups. Please consider these alternatives and make them citywide. I'd also like the chance to submit my comments in writing. Thank you.
Please do. Thank you. And that's everybody who's signed up. Is there anybody else who wants to speak in this public hearing? If not, I'll close the public hearing to verbal comment and keep it open for written. Okay. We don't have an issues matrix yet, so.
We don't have an issues matrix in the packet. We have started to create issues matrix for the next packet with the issues that have come in so far. So I think what would be helpful on this item tonight is if there are other things that arose out of your reading or out of the public testimony that you want to make sure are on that issues matrix, and you can provide that information tonight, or if you do it by next Monday, we can also get it in there.
Okay.
We're just for Overlake and for the green building program, and we'll do utilities next.
Commissioners, do you have anything immediate that you want to have on an issues matrix? Commissioner Aparna.
Chair, I have emailed my comments, just putting it in the record that it's all gone in there.
And it'll show up in the issues matrix next time. Commissioner Weston.
So I really appreciate the water thinking that's happening so far. The one piece that I would love more information about is what the current standards are around submetering, specifically for apartments. I think it's very hard for people to accurately judge their own water consumption. And over the next 20, 30 years, I absolutely expect that there will be times where people want to know what they're using so they can conserve, or Redmond wants to bill high consumption people more highly than low consumption people. And right now, the only way I know to do that is by installing submetering in building. It's a very expensive retrofit. It's much easier to include from the beginning. And so I think that's really setting us up well for future growth and future water weirdness if we have that from the beginning. I looked around for codes. I did not find much. It doesn't seem to really exist yet. I know that a lot of buildings are choosing to retrofit because the ROI is just so high. It's often under a year. But with that, it seems like it would make sense to consider insisting on it from the beginning, especially where Redmond has city water. It just seems like it would be one of those decisions that doesn't come back to haunt us, that we would really stand by. So that's if that could be in a matrix once we get to it, I would really appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Anything else? I'm still blown away by the fact that the Sacramento area didn't even have water metering when I lived in California. So it's been in the last 20 years that the Sacramento area got water metering. Yeah. There's some context for you. Anything else? If you have more things, get it to staff by Monday so that they have time to prepare for our next meeting, so they can be in our packet the following Friday. Anything else? If not, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break before we go on to the next topic. So it's 8:41. That brings us back at 8:46. So see you in 5 minutes. We're back. And we're ready to move on to Redmond 2050 Utilities Element, Draft 2 Study Session. And Glenn, you're up.
Good evening, Commissioners. So we're just wrapping up. On November 1st and November 16th, we introduced the second drafts of some different elements. Due to time constraints, we weren't able to get through all those. At the meeting on the 16th, we kind of did the presentation of the updates for the second draft of the utilities element. And then we also started collecting some comments and questions on the second draft. But the last part of that time, of that presentation before we ran out, I should say of that study session, was to go over the issues matrix from the first draft back in June. I'd like to be able to go over that during our allotted time. As such, so let me pull that up on the screen. Okay, that is up there. So we won't go line by line, but the first issue was brought up by Vice Chair Weston regarding some of the language on UT 7 and kind of what the changes were there, and is related in the comments. Essentially, the idea of that additional language was to affirm the concept of proportionality related to growth. So,
Okay, this makes so much sense, and thank you for the explanation. And I'm ready to close.
Okay, thank you. Issue number 2 was brought up by Vice Chair Weston regarding policies UT 13 and 14. And that was really just relating to, I believe, underground and type policies. And one policy was related to new versus existing. So just some kind of explanation of why those are different policies there. So.
Yep, that's totally fair. We can close.
Okay. Third issue was related just to some of the stormwater facilities, especially particularly UT 37, and kind of we provided some context from our public works folks kind of about how we look at regional facilities versus on-site and other things like that, which again, I won't read all that, but I would encourage folks to kind of look at that on detail and some of the links to some of our storm water utility, our MPDS stormwater permit, and we also have a web page on regional stormwater facilities and how we use them in the city.
Okay, I loved this answer. One clarification I just wanted to make, if you scroll down to the link section,
yes.
The first link currently goes to the permit. So if you could just update that actual link to go to the utility, it's just one up in the navigation menu.
Okay.
And then the regional stormwater facilities link is actually exactly what I was looking for. So I was really relieved to see Redmond both has the plan in place and is communicating it and it's forward looking. So I really appreciate this, and I can close.
Okay. Just put my note in here. Okay.
Commissioner Parna.
I think there's one thing, I don't know, Glenn, you haven't mentioned this. I'm hoping it's there, because otherwise I will ask it when it comes up, is I know it's the stormwater is being modeled for the growth, but we also want to make sure it's being modeled for events such as the rains outside, like extreme climate events, because that wasn't there in the water plan. So in the stormwater plan, you want to make sure it's paralleling. So I don't know if it's attached here, so.
There wasn't a mathematical model. There was an explanation of that they are looking forward to that sort.
No, we need the modeling because the water plan didn't have a modeling for climate. For growth, yes.
Right.
So
if you go to that third link, you can see what they have there and see if any of it meets.
Okay. Sorry, I must have missed that. Okay, thank you.
All right. Issue number 4, there was some question regarding UT 61 and how the electric facilities plan is used. And there was a question raised if this related policies preclude other energy utility providers serving Redmond. And then this statement just really provides context, again, on what the utilities element intention is related to the Growth Management Act. And as we should note, nothing in the comprehensive plan related to this section has anything really, doesn't preclude different service providers. But right now, Puget Sound Energy is the service provider, and related to the structure and requirements for utilities elements, that's why we reference that. But nothing in this section or in the comprehensive plan precludes other energy providers. So just wanted to provide that context on that one. So
I think it's fine, but in other policies, I see the word successors or alternates can be used. Because when we have Puget Sound Energy, let's say somebody comes up with a community grid. Now we have to change UD 61 to provide that guidance. So we want to keep that door open. I'm not saying that it's a barrier, but I mean, you've given an explanation on that. But I want to make sure that it's completely open as opposed to something that would need a comp plan amendment. Commissioner Weston?
Yeah, I wanted to echo this. So the original conversation was just about like community energy or like basically different energy sources that aren't necessarily coming straight from Puget Sound Energy. And just having the flexibility in Redmond to permit that sort of thing. And I think that I want to make sure that it's not an exclusive right in our code or in our policies for Puget Sound Energy. And so I really agreed with this comment. I thought that it was a good thing to just introduce the idea of flexibility so that if there's a different model a few years down the road that we are able to do it here. And that would be specifically for energy produced in Redmond for something like solar or like that sort of idea, that it doesn't all have to go through Puget Sound Energy, that there are other options.
Let's just keep this open if it's okay and kind of reword it. Make sense?
I guess for clarification, what are you looking?
We could close this, but have this changed. The UD 61 should have reference Puget Sound Energy's electric facilities plan, as well as any successors or alternates or something like that. Something to the effect that if there is somebody else coming up, even if it's a small provider, it's not going to go through a comp plan amendment for, let's say, one small development to bring up their own little utility grid.
Or energy sharing that doesn't go through a Puget Sound Energy program.
Right.
Okay, I would suggest we'll leave that open for the third draft, just make sure that we revisit that. Okay. Issue 5, I know there's a few different, you can see there's a pretty wide-ranging answer. Just some of the questions on telecommunication policies, how telecommunications is defined, equity, quality of service, and aesthetics of towers. The response here just provides some context and definitions of that, and then how that relates to our municipal code and our zoning code, where these policies actually have an impact. So.
Commissioner West.
So I just want to jump in. My interest on this one specifically is around the appearance of the towers. I've been annoying family and friends with this for a month and a half now. I feel strongly that most of the shields and lampshades and fake trees and other alternatives that I have seen in Redmond do not look modern and don't really help us. Versus if you look around, for example, Kirkland, and you just see a cell phone tower and you look at it and you're like, that's a cell phone tower, if you even still notice it. I now have people sending me pictures of particularly egregious examples. I'm enjoying them immensely. However, I really don't think this has a place in our code in 2023. I think the concern about it is old-fashioned.
Yeah, I don't look at the camouflage cell phone towers and go, oh, that doesn't look like a cell phone tower. I go, oh, that looks like a cell phone tower.
Also, we have a very, very large satellite dish on the roof of one of the downtown buildings, kind of behind the parking garage that goes with Redmond Bar and Grill. So I've gotten multiple pictures of that. I can see limiting large satellite dishes, but just the towers in general, I don't have an issue with.
Commissioner Parna.
I think we spent too much money on hiding something which is urban infrastructure, which actually we should be proud of, personally. Yeah, we don't need to, we just need to own it, you know. It's a tower, let it be a tower, right? Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
Okay, just clarification response. We had initially recommended removing UT 87, which talked about the aesthetics, but as you know, as we note in this, as we researched it, that policy was used to support part of our zoning code on that. So one concern, I guess, is staff. If we remove that policy, then that kind of leaves some of that zoning code regulation kind of hanging. So,
right.
Is there? I mean, there was also a lot of bullet points on UT 87. I mean, we could still maybe some middle road of having a policy there, but just much more simplified than what was prescribed in the current version, which is why we voted to remove it. So I just wanted to throw that out for some thought.
I think if you want to keep it, then keep it, but I would limit the policy to saying that the aesthetic should look modern, which is fairly interpretable, but
yeah,
will preclude many of the the shields. Yeah. And then also, I think for cell phone towers in particular, like I think people are much more concerned about that they work than the aesthetic. So but that's already limited by the zoning code. So it's like we're really in a space where it's like I don't think most of the modern towers are going to be a significant problem that we need to be spending a lot of time on.
This is a relic of the 90s.
It feels very 90s to me.
Yeah.
It really does. And so the more we
concern.
can, if it makes sense to leave it in, then just make it as short and concise as possible and just say modern and leave it there. I get that that's usually we have a bar of like, can we prove what this is? This isn't going to be that, but then hopefully we can avoid the shrubbery approach.
And maybe the zoning code reference is a target of future zoning
that
code
might be something
cleanups.
we can bring up in a future zoning code rewrite, is to kind of look at that in more detail.
Yeah.
And have some staff that has some expertise on that part of the code too, so we can, yeah.
Commissioner Parna.
So I think this whole issue has three parts, right? One is the aesthetics part, one is the definitions part. The definition is fine. It's boring, but it's long, and it's long, but it's fine. It works, right? But I think the equitable access to the internet, I had some questions. I understand that there are, and I've sent this in written comment just for the record, but I understand that telecommunications is not granted the same status of electricity or water as a utility, but I think we can, as a city, start considering whether telecommunications is one of those services that everybody needs to have, right? I know that federal law and state law goes up to a point. The FCC rule has come forward saying there should not be a digital divide. There should be access across like all, and there are grants coming our way as well. But I'm just wondering what we can do to make sure that we are providing access where to people where cell phone towers or cell phone reception's not good or the FiOS cables doesn't go there. What can we as a city do? And that's a question I would like to add to this and keep this open.
Commissioner Weston.
So I actually, like, as far as I can tell, if we were saying that everyone should get like a wired connection to internet, I don't think we have that today. But I don't see evidence from like the census, et cetera, that people don't have, like if they wanted to have a hotspot, like I don't know of anywhere in Redmond right now where that's not possible.
You can get there's so many different kinds of service. Even
right.
using the term wired is kind of,
well,
like you can get Starlink now, which is some of the highest speed internet. Not to promote any particular company, but as an example.
But I thought that was captured actually already so I'm not sure that we necessarily need more.
I do not believe, okay, let's flip the question. Is every area of Redmond UGA covered, like has internet access or cell phone coverage? Is it all covered 100%? Like if somebody had a cell phone, can they use it everywhere in the city? Are there any dead spots, dead zones? For me, that is a question, right? And then the second part is on the other side, whether they have the money to, pay for those services. But that's step two. So if you can provide some information on whether all of Redmond is connected either through cell phone service or internet, high-speed internet, then we know where we stand. I think that's if it's covered, then of course this is moot, but if it isn't covered.
I was going to say that's especially true from the apartment buildings, which we spent a lot of time talking. Can you guys hear me? We spent a lot of time talking about affordable housing. Internet access is a necessity for jobs, for managing your life. And so I know for a fact that in a lot of these buildings, internet is very spotty. So it'd be really good to understand how the accessibility is from that lens, looks like.
I would just note, there's a tool from the FCC that shows broadband coverage, and I think as our team, we kind of looked at that a little bit as we were working through this and noted that Redmond had coverage based on their definition there. So again, it's all definitions and federal requirements. So
yeah, maybe there's an opportunity to evolve the definitions because if you don't have access, you don't have access even with the tool.
It's also be noted, different providers have different, like AT&T is going to have something different than
Verizon,
whatever the name of the next merger was, kind of thing, and yeah.
T-Mobile. The school district has the best information probably on this.
I was just about to chime in for that. So we have fairly good information as of COVID because they did that was a very real case study of like, did children have access to internet? The school district had to hand out hotspots to a lot of families. Not a lot of families, like percentage-wise, but a reasonable number across the 3 cities. But I don't think there were any issues like we've heard about in like more rural areas or that sort of thing where kids could not get online. It was more of a affordability issue.
I think it would be nice to have that data here so that we can close this, because if there is 100% coverage on this, then the next step is to talk about affordability of the services, right? So at this point in time, it would be nice to see that data from map. And if the school district has done a study, we should have that information here.
It wasn't a study, it was just everyone went remote. And so then the families who could not go remote.
Right. No, so that's what I'm trying to say, that if there is no map or no, like you said, the FCC has a map. It would be nice to have that kind of image over here to understand, this is our UGA, and this is what the FCC is saying, that we're all covered, or there's a little gap here. And that would be nice, because that should inform our policies in some ways. At least that's how I see it.
Can I actually ask a question? Because I get confused on this one a little bit, like who owns it? Because companies have a choice where they want to provide service. Redmond, I'm not clear like how much we actually, like how much control we have over this.
It's kind of, we tried to address that in the response there, but ultimately, these are private utilities, and what these high-level policies really get to us providing land for utilities, both public utilities, which is stuff that the city owns and controls, our water system, our stormwater, stuff like that, and then also private utilities. So really, this gets into allowing them to say, put their lines in our right-of-ways, like along with our other utilities, or allowing them to put up a satellite dish or receiver on land. So allowing our zoning code to allow telecommunications facilities or other kind of private facilities. That's really what these policies get down to. And allowing that, with the growth projection, the job projections, that, we're making sure that we're planning for adequate land and rules to allow them to have their facilities, especially as things evolve. So that's really what we're limited to, especially on private utilities. And that's why there is a policy that the city allows its public buildings to have, these agreements, we call them franchise agreements, to put their satellites, say, on our water tanks and things like that. That's really what these policies are really for, or
because we're not
are intended
proposing
for.
a city telecommunications utility or city internet utility.
Right. Okay. So that clarifies, because so we can have a goal as a city of wishing that everyone had great internet, but that really doesn't necessarily belong in this document.
Yeah, and that's, if you see how the policy is written, I mean, we heard the equitable access. So, so we say, work with our providers, we can't really mandate, right? So we work with our providers to provide equitable and quality service for all residents, and perhaps when when the city staff and attorneys are negotiating these lease agreements, these franchise agreements, there might be some wiggle room, but as you go into kind of the municipal code, which is not really in the context of the planning commission, but that has some guidelines too of kind of how the city does the franchise and lease agreements too. Like if it's, and that's really where we also only have much flexibility is if it's on the city's property. Obviously, a company can buy a piece of land, the zoning code allows them to put up an antenna or something like that, and that's really kind of in their purview of that. So really the only opportunity we really have for a little bit to push those kind of issues that we just discussed is probably with our franchise agreements. So that's why we try to emphasize that we are very limited in some of the things for these kind of bigger goals that we have as part of Redmond 2050. So, but we hope we're trying to address that. So.
Commissioner Parna.
Well, I think from my perspective, if we get that data and we see no dead spots in the city, we're great. Right? If there are dead spots, then we say that in the identified dead spots, we would encourage providers to come forth and the city would meet them halfway or however that works, right? But the whole point is I feel we can do better on this. I genuinely feel that this isn't, it might sound aspirational, and I know our hands are tied, but if we do know that the entire city is covered, we can rest peaceful and say, okay, we'll work on the affordability piece. But you're expecting growth. We don't even know if there are dead spots in the city which are not covered consistently by cell phone, whatever, broadband, however you want to place that, right? If we don't know what areas are not 100% covered, then it is a problem when we're planning. That's how I see it, because it is an equity issue. And when there was a crisis at COVID time and everybody cobbled together hotspots, that's great, but that's not how we should be going forward. That's how I see it. So any data you can provide saying, hey, you know what, we're covered, don't worry about it, I'll sleep better at night. Thank you.
Well, my understanding from what Susan said and from what others have said, that the school district stepped in because there was a money issue that people couldn't afford. It wasn't a lack of service available issue. And if they were providing hotspots, then there was cell phone coverage available.
Those hotspots were sometimes in buses too. So
Yeah, but then not here, not in Redmond.
Okay. So
as somebody who works for the phone company, there is 100% coverage in the city of Redmond.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't think there's any, I've never seen anything to indicate that you could not get coverage in Redmond, both broadband and cell phone.
All I'm looking for is a map that says that. That's all. I mean, if it's there, then the conversation's
And in fact, you have generally more than one choice for broadband.
But shouldn't the city know this, right? Like if you have AT&T covering X spots and then T-Mobile covering X area, you want to have the overlaid map as something that is part of this discussion. Or am I misunderstanding?
The broadband question is different than the cell phone. There are areas of ubiquitous coverage from all of the carriers. I can guarantee it. It's all going to be the same map. It's going to be 100%. It's going to be 100% covered. But the broadband, if you really wanted to know that, is different. I lived in a house that had copper as its primary source up until 10 years ago.
Right.
And it was only through some pretty spectacular means by my husband that we got
expensive.
that we got different service. But
Right.
but there are places that only have, that are a little more, for whatever reason, that have maybe just only copper.
Yeah, except they aren't. Now there are places that they won't support the copper anymore.
Okay. I personally would like to see more data just to say, okay, all the maps are overlaid, it's all covered, but it's just me being paranoid that we're not leaving any part of the city behind.
If I can, so I have a strong actually opinion that we should not. And the reason that I don't is because we don't control the utilities and we don't have any contract with them. So to put the energy into creating a map that we have no enforcement over and won't know if it changes, I don't think that really helps in terms of deciding the policy.
Actually, what he said was that the city could potentially work with its own facilities like water tanks and things to facilitate, to encourage.
We already do that. But it's not a change.
No, that's not a change. But if there is a spot, let's say there is let's say there's no blind spot. Okay, this question is moot. But let's say there is a small spot which needs coverage and we find that out. We don't have the data right now. It's all anecdotal about the school district.
Unless you are aware of a problem here, I think it's not actually a real problem here.
Yeah, I don't.
I know that it's problems in some places, but I don't, unless you are actually, have been talking to people or have had a personal experience where you can't get coverage somewhere, I don't think that this is actually something we need to spend time chasing.
So we are saying cell phone, broadband, and fiber are 100% all over the city. There is no spot in the city which cannot be accessed if the building allows it. Are we sure about that. If you're sure about that, we can close.
I know of no reason, no place where you cannot get cell phone coverage and broadband.
I would also add that, what you're asking is something I don't think as a city we can confirm because these are private things. So there's a FCC map that's, updated pretty regularly, but I said as a team, we all looked at it, showed coverage all of Redmond. I mean, it's really the very rural areas that might still have a little bit of spotty issues, but, the map was even a little outdated. It's of course, like everyone does, I zoomed onto my house first, right? And I was like, oh, they show a lot slower speeds than what I actually have, because I did a speed test, I got a little nerdy about that, and it's like, oh, I have way higher speed than even with the FCC map. So I would say even those are probably not as updated. And the technology, as I said, it's constantly changing, and there's no way that a city staff, could somehow test all these different multitude of providers and, but so we can provide a link to that FCC map and see also if the state, because there's usually some different groups that kind of do this mapping, but it's all online kind of stuff. So happy to share those links.
My way of looking at it is as long as there is some proof that we are covered, I'm good. I don't need anything changed if we have the data saying it's there. But you're saying it's private utilities, so by the end of the day, because it's a private utility, the city will have to say that we don't want to push equitable access because it's a private utility. That's effectively what I am hearing. I know it sounds...
no,
because
that's not what we're
we
saying.
don't have any control over the private utilities. We don't have maps, so we are guessing that it's 100% covered.
No, we're saying we have seen no evidence, we have heard no complaints, we have a lot of evidence to indicate that the city is covered.
Okay. All right, we can close this then. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, issue number 6 was just a question on the amateur radio emergency communications. We note that policy UT 85, and hopefully this previous conversation adds some context to that kind of conversation there. But we also want to note that our zoning code does have design standards for under 2156 for amateur radio towers. So making the change, pulling out that policy specifically for amateur radio towers doesn't have any impact on us actually allowing them or things like that. And by actually having that in our zoning code does give that some prioritization for that. And our updated policy also keeps that in consideration.
Okay, so this is one where I wanted to push back on deleting this. So the original policy was acknowledge the importance of citizen band and amateur radio services in potential emergency situations when considering regulatory changes that would affect the operational ability of such facilities. So the links that were included saying that these were still, they were more about the way they look or that other kinds of towers exist in Redmond. These ones specific, to me, the purpose of the old policy was to say, please remember that these things that sound like a weird hobbyist relic from decades ago are actually part of the current Cascadia earthquake plan. So if there was a disaster where we lose communication, the state plan to solve the problem revolves around these towers. So I personally think that this policy should stay in because it doesn't sound like real infrastructure still. It sounds like something that is old-fashioned and but it's not. It is a current day need. It will be needed in 2050. So to me, this policy should stay.
Right, the policy is saying, remember these when you make regulatory changes, and that seems still relevant.
And I don't care what they look like. So I have no opinion about the zoning code that says the appearance of them. That's not really my purview in this. But I do want us to make sure that we still know about these things and keep them in an emergency instead of someone coming in and saying, like, surely no one still uses this, and then moving past them because we do need them.
Yeah, they're.
I think, and this is significantly important to the resilience piece.
Yeah.
So given one of the themes, I think it has to come back in. Agree with you.
So keep this issue open or closed, or?
As long as the policy stays, we can close it. But if there,
We want the policy.
but if you want to remove
Keep
it, then
open
I'd
for
like
the
to
next
leave it
draft,
open.
and we can look at that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's see, issue 7. Oh, these are some of the issues that came up during the initial for draft 2.
I think this works great. Thank you. You can
so
close it.
Okay, I was going to say, we actually weren't ready. We were going to address this a little bit. I guess this one we did address. Just wanted to know, your number 8, I think you submitted a couple weeks ago. So we'll work on a comment or response for that in the final draft. And you also had number 9, you had a kind of 4 bullet points. Same thing, we were able to address regarding UT4. The others we'll have to start continue the research. So, and that is all we have on that.
Okay.
And then we'll be bringing this back for the final draft, I believe, February, March or so. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you.
Anything else on this topic? Okay, we'll move on to our next topic, which is Redmond 2050 Land Use Element Draft 2 Study Session. Wait for Lauren and Ian to get over here.
Hello again.
Welcome back.
Good evening.
So I am Ian Lefcourt, Senior Planner with Long Range Planning. I use he, him pronouns, and this is...
Lauren Alpert. I use she, her pronouns, Senior Planner with Long Range Planning.
And we're here to talk about the second draft of the land use element. We recognize the time and we recognize the breadth of content that this element offers. So our approach would be, we'll walk through the element and then we'll add to our issues matrix everything you want to see. We, of course, have until Monday to receive further comments, but we'll just collect them tonight and then we'll try and respond to them at the meeting on the 20th. So our land use element, second draft. As an introduction, just a little reminder, the land use element is really kind of the guiding northern star of the whole comprehensive plan. It helps set the direction of future growth, how we're going to meet those growth allocations we discussed earlier, and really how we're going to meet the needs of our community through the built environment or through the lack of built environment in preserving open space. The land use element includes a future land use map. So this is the high level of where most of the components will go. And as you'll see later, we did some streamlining in that area. And this is my favorite thing to say. While all comprehensive plan elements are important, the land use element really is the star of the show. Some of the policy drivers here, they really centered on equity and affordable housing, especially with that balance of sustainability and resilience, while also meeting the regional growth requirements, which are not insignificant. There's also new state and regional requirements that greatly intersect with land use element policies and need that policy support. So we've tried to get some coherency there as well. And here's that streamlining. The policies, we've gotten down to 46. As you all know, accessibility is one of our driving factors for this plan process. So we're really trying to keep things as abridged as possible, so it's as readable as possible, while still making sure that we cover all of the components that are necessary to get the outcomes our community wants. Now, the total land use designations only went from 13 to 11, but the implementing zones went from 49 to 21. We felt that there's a huge opportunity here to create opportunities of consistency, helping our stakeholders, whether it's developers, renters, property owners, just to like understand more of the city without having to deal with like the difference between R5 and R6, which are very similar. Some of the significant policy updates, of course, number one is that variety of housing choices, expanding middle housing, and ensuring that some non-residential uses are included into that area so we can get those complete neighborhoods that our community has really requested. Some of the classics include daycare, and as I mentioned at the previous meeting, most anything delicious, food-based services.
Yeah, a lot of this also includes kind of structuring those mixed-use designations both in the centers and then also citywide.
Yeah.
And then looking at those different intensities of mixed-use zones. So depending on the district, something bigger or smaller, depending, so it fits the scale of the neighborhood. So that was what we were working towards in draft 1. So what has changed in draft 2? We've added that narrative to add context to a lot of these policies. So that includes the objectives and especially how those policies relate to our themes of sustainability and equity. We've updated since the first draft some of those neighborhood land use designations and zones. So for example, the neighborhood mixed use zone zone is now added to the neighborhood land use designation. So they have a mixed use zone in that designation. And then we kind of added some clarity in the policies in terms of what urban recreation is and and then the parks and open space policies. And then just general cleaning up the draft for clarity and making sure the policy language is clear.
So as you can see, the big consolidation here is looking at those different types of residential at the top of the currently adopted plan, the single-family constrained, the single-family urban, and the multifamily urban. All of that is now streamlined into a neighborhood land use designation. We've got the neighborhood residential, which will be detached single-family homes and middle housing. Then we've got our neighborhood multifamily, and then that neighborhood mixed use that we just discussed. One of the benefits of kind of scooching that neighborhood mixed use implementing zone into that neighborhood land use designation is now a property owner has a much smoother public process to rezone. If you want to go between land use designations, it is a much more significant process. So this we feel will help the neighborhoods more readily adapt to the specific needs of that area of our city. And Lauren has done great work with kind of all those mixed uses, which I think reflect kind of geographic areas as well as intensities. What do you think about, could you speak more to the corridor and mixed use?
Yeah, we added in, those different mixed use districts so that it's, for the citywide districts, we have that neighborhood scale, the corridor, which will be along our corridors, so that could be a greater intensity along our high transit area. Because if you remember from the DEIS and the EIS, we have that kind of merging of the centers and corridor model, so we'll be seeing growth along our corridors, or our select corridors. We also have the urban mixed use, so that'll combine some of those commercial and mixed use areas that we currently have and adopting those new mixed use districts.
And that's a little error. The neighborhood mixed use is not actually in citywide mixed use. I apologize for that. But we're really hoping that through this process, we can get that kind of tiering of different services and intensities to help create smoother transitions between these vibrant areas of the city.
Commissioner Weston.
Sorry, can you go back? So neighborhood mixed use is only in neighborhood, not in the citywide mixed use?
That is my understanding.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. We recently brought some elements to council, and we're going to bring this second draft to council in January. And we're hoping to get a review of a final draft in April. And we recognize this touches a lot of other pieces, so we will be sure to do iterative updates as relevant from other conversations that are coming to Planning Commission. But that's kind of it.
Commissioner Aparna.
I just had a question. I really liked how it's so much more streamlined. Yes. So when we have these docket items that come up in front, where there could be a land use designation change request, this makes it like easier, right? I mean, it's highly unlikely that one's going to jump from one particular zone to another because it's all so clear. Or is it still a lot of wiggle room within each thing to move around? I don't know if it's making sense, but I'm just looking forward for the processes when they ask for changes. So
between land use designations, that would be tough, right? Like if you're in Overlake
Right.
and you're like, well, actually, I want to do Marymore.
I know.
That'll be a tough sell.
Right.
But the implementing zones that are in each of those mixed use, like going from edge zone in downtown mixed use to town center would be
right.
a relatively substantial change, but it still is an opportunity that has a public process that fosters more discussion rather than barriers.
So within the zones, so let's say something is zoned neighborhood residential, and somebody wants to go to neighborhood multifamily or mixed use, would that require a docket item? Or within a classified land use, is the transition smoother? Like, what is the process?
Yes, it would just be a rezoning request. I will get a table put into the issues matrix that identifies all the steps that would occur if it was a land use designation change, and then I'll do the same for all the steps that will be involved if it is a rezone.
Yes, please. Thank you.
You got it.
I want to be sure we get into the issues matrix, the letter we received today from the school district.
Yes.
We have not yet added that to the issues matrix. We do have Commissioner Aparna's
Right.
reflected.
Commissioner Weston.
So I had a point of confusion about the community facilities. I'm not clear how those work relative to the zones. If you want a fire station, does that have anything to do with the zoning map? If you want a library, does that have anything to do with the zoning map, or a public center of some sort? Are there rules? Anyway, I'm sure there's a table somewhere that clarifies this, but it didn't make sense to me from this document how I would look up that information.
Understood. We'll, in the issues matrix, respond to the comment, and we'll also just share right now, specifically with facilities and like green infrastructure, that's an area where we're really hoping to do a clean kind of end of all the elements definition, and then harmonizing that across. Some of them are technically like Growth Management Act or Revised Code of Washington definitions, and so we need to be very precise with our language when and where. But we appreciate that feedback. We'll get it in the issues matrix and we'll address it.
Yeah, and the big thing, the one that really popped for me is I would really like to make sure that schools I get this has come up in other ways too, but I'd really like to make sure that schools are kind of allowed wherever land comes up, the school district would be able to use it to build a needed school, that it's not somehow prevented by either our zoning map or our land use map.
Understood. Can do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Okay, I have two short questions. And these were just confusion on my part. So table 2-1, so I liked this a lot. It was about the 2024 totals. I wasn't totally clear how it relates to 2050. So if these are expected to change over time, it was the percentage of different land uses by total acreage in Redmond. I wasn't totally clear if like 2024 is what we're saying is just this is what it is and all the growth will happen in those places, or if we're saying that these might change over. Anyway, I was very confused by that. So I wasn't sure if it was 2024 and forward unless amended, or like if there was some sort of growth implication there.
We will review and clarify.
Amazing. And then this was a very small comment. So for map LU1, I would love if the 4 light rail stops and the light rail line could be added to that map, because I think it makes the centers just so sensible. That was the whole neighborhoods and where the centers are and all of that. And just having the light rail there makes the story complete to me.
Yeah. Yes, I think light rail should be a part of all our future maps.
You got it.
It's going to be a significant part of the city from now on. Anything else? Go ahead.
I don't know where this comes up, so it might be a really stupid question. The TOD piece, does that get tucked into the land use designation? Or the reason I'm asking is because we talk about TOD as a type of development we are encouraging. So is that tucked away under these, or is it above it as a concept?
Both. Everyone's favorite answer. Part of the principles of TOD have been implemented into our land use designations and implementing zones just around the areas. But I do know that Becky is working on a specific TOD component, which I am not familiar with, so I need to follow up with her about where that's at.
Okay, so they would plug into specific land use zones?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be in the regulations.
Commissioner Wesson.
This is just a comment, not a question. I loved the vision part. I just read it and I was like, that was great. And then I wanted to reread it. So I just wanted to say thank you. It is clear how much feedback went into constructing that. But growth can be really, like not inclusionary. It can be really ugly. It can be very prickly in a lot of different ways. And then this was describing the complete alternate, where it's like everyone in Redmond could benefit with our growth. Like the city could be such a better place to live if we grow in a really planful way. And I read it and I was like, that is excellent. And I read it again and then I moved on. But just thank you for pulling that together into such a specific vision, because I just enjoyed it. I want to live in that city. So thank you.
I'm just going to give credit to our division leader, Jeff Churchill, for doing the introductory draft to that. Yeah.
Yay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just as a quick reminder, if we get it by Monday, we can get it into the issues matrix for the next meeting. Thank you.
All right. Staff and commissioner updates. Glenn, what do you have for us?
Just a couple of things. As it was noted, the next meeting is December 20th because of the holidays, and that'll be our last meeting of 2023. Just as a reminder, as liaisons, we switch quarterly, so starting in January, Ian will be the liaison again, but as always, you can always reach out to both of us and Jeff and other folks on our team if you have any issues, questions, etc. Other thing to note is that we have some upcoming vacancies on the Planning Commission and that the city has begun advertising for that. It's on the city's website under Board and Commissions. So we just request that you get that word spread around. And of course, we can provide some talking points or that link if folks can't find it. So hoping to get a great pool of candidates so we can get those positions filled. So, and that's, I believe, all I have. Yeah, and I believe to continue public hearing on the 20th also. So.
Great.
So quorum, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Please.
All right. Commissioner updates? I got to watch our soon-to-be departed Commissioner Nueva Camina be sworn in as a city councilor last night, so congratulations.
So I suppose that is my update, is that the 20th will be my last meeting as a planning commissioner.
So, okay. With that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we are adjourned.